Hi, everyone. This is Doro Kiley. This podcast is for the seeker, one who is in quest of sanity and that ever elusive inner peace. Especially if you ask life's big questions, this is for you. I have the privilege of interviewing people who are the lights that guide the way, like the famous allegory of Plato's cave where illusions hold us captive. We need helpers to break our chains and show us to the light of day. I ask my guests questions like, what can we believe? What is reality? And where should we put our focus? And let's not be afraid to inquire about death or extraterrestrial intelligence. So I hope you'll find this offering helpful, and if so, please subscribe, and may we all find our way back to the light of day. Greetings, fellow seekers. This is Doro, and in this podcast, I have the great pleasure of introducing Paula Markham. She's been a licensed professional counselor for over 30 years in the beautiful state of Virginia. Her practice incorporates mindfulness-based therapies and the exploration of many of life's big questions. At 72 years old, Paula's own self-inquiries have turned increasingly toward the subject of death as our inevitable and final life event. This week, the three questions I'll be asking Paula are: how would you describe your personal spiritual quest? Why have you chosen death as our topic for today? And what tools or methods can help people feel more balanced? So I hope you enjoy our conversation, and may this light illuminate your path. Well, hi, Paula. How are you?
Yeah,
It's
good
good to
day.
see you. How's everything there in Virginia?
We're having a good time. Having a beautiful, beautiful day for February.
Great. That's great. So, yeah, I'm really excited because you are actually my first guest for this podcast, and I think I chose very well. I'll just tell the listeners that you have been a good friend of mine for many years with off and on again, anyway, we could say. But so, yeah, this is really fun, and I'm hoping that you get a lot out of it, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So, do you have anything you want to say first before we get started, or you want me to just jump in with our first question?
Let's dive in.
Okay. Okay. So, today's first question: how would you describe your personal spiritual quest?
Okay. Well, I actually have a little bit of trouble with that terminology
Okay.
because a quest implies that you're looking for something out there, that you're going after something. And, you're not successful until you find that thing. And until you find it, you're failing, or you're discontented, or you're, unfinished.
Mm.
And although I've certainly had that experience in my life of looking for something and not knowing even what I'm looking for and not feeling like I'm successful. As I've lived a few more years, I've come to really prefer the term path, like a
Path.
spiritual path,
Yeah.
like path, because wherever you are on the path is where you are.
I
And
like that. Yes, you're right.
if
So
you're really where you are, you're succeeding.
that's
I
powerful.
if I'm on a quest and I haven't found my holy grail, my thing, I'm not contented. But if I'm on my path and I'm fully where I'm succeeding, and I can be content to know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. There's a one in Buddhism, there's a wonderful practice of walking. And the focus is not to get anywhere, it's arriving in every step. As every footfall lands, you go, I'm here. I'm here. So you're always home, always where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So there's no thinking involved, right? You're just aware of what your intention is and the movement of your body in the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
And in a bigger sense, I think that being on a path can be like that, where rather than think I need to be meditating more, or I should go to Nepal, or I should, study with this teacher or buy this course. We'd say, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And as these things arise, I will do them or not do them. And either way, it's the right thing.
So when somebody's going through a difficult period in their life and their mind is kind of all over the place, is this something that you're able to work with to just stay? Yeah, because it's
Go ahead.
challenging. I think that's why most of the listeners here are going to be on this spiritual path, trying to find that peace of mind. So do you feel like you have cultivated this ability to be, one foot in front of the other?
Yes. Yes. In fact, that's, I think, the thing I'm most happy about in my so far 72 years is that I feel like I am better able to arrive at where I am
That's powerful.
and
So in the moment,
to be with moments, even, difficult moments. I've done some work with helping people die. I've done gone on ambulance. I'm an EMT and I've been on ambulance work. I've been a crisis counselor. So being in places where things are going haywire is a really good place to practice being where you
boy, oh boy, yeah. You don't want a disoriented EMT working on you.
are.
Wow. And so you've seen death then. This is part of our topic today, which is question number 2. Do you have anything else to say about the spiritual path then? Any,
Well,
in general or for yourself
for
personally?
myself, I said that being said, that one takes what comes to one. I would characterize the first 20 years of my spiritual path as wandering around in the dark.
Hmm.
I was a very, very shy kid. I was afraid of the world. It felt dangerous to me. I didn't understand it. I felt like I'd been dropped behind enemy lines without a radio, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the first part of my path was coming into the world. I did a very bold thing. I actually went to Europe, lived in France for a year as an au pair.
How old were you?
I was 19 when I
Yeah,
left,
that's
20
big.
when I got home. And my parents were shocked. They said, honey, you won't even ride a bus across town and you're going to go 6,000 miles away where you don't speak the language very well. And I'm like, I have to do it. I don't know why,
Oh,
but I have to do it.
wow. That's incredible. That's a
And
big jump.
it
Yeah,
was huge. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done until that point in my life. And it was very hard. I, it was, I was so frightened and intimidated. I'd never stayed in a hotel by myself. I'd never hailed a taxi. I had never been in a big city. I was just, it was all new and very scary. And I didn't speak the language very well. But by the time I got home a year later, America was so easy, because I did speak the language. And by then I had learned enough about the world to go, I got this.
so when you're under that much stress, were you aware of this mindfulness practice back then?
No, no,
Okay.
I
That's
was, my coping strategy was I cried a lot and,
oh.
and then I would take a deep breath and, try to talk to strangers or do whatever I had to do. No,
How
I
did
didn't have
you
the
yeah,
tools then that I have now.
how did you end up there? You got a job just out of the newspaper or you just
Yes, I actually was going to living at home, going to junior college, and I took French classes. And our French teacher was a Parisian woman, and she wouldn't let us speak anything but French in class, which scared everybody, but I loved it. I was like head of the class. I was so eager. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a translator or something. And the teacher
mm.
said, well, you have to go where a language is spoken to really learn it. And as far as she was concerned, Paris was the only place that French was spoken properly.
And I think that's probably true, yeah.
So I saw a thing in the newspaper about au pair girls, which I'd never heard of, and they had the name of an agency that would find au pair positions for American girls. And I wrote a letter. This was way before the internet. So I wrote a letter, and, weeks later, I got a reply that said, "Oh, yes, you can come on such and such a date." And it gave me an address, and I just went,
Yeah. Yeah.
no support structure. I just showed up with my big suitcase and my rudimentary French.
So it sounds to me like you were kind of following an intuitive impulse that just knew you had to do it, um, to break through something that you knew you were trying to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, so I think some of the listeners here might be in a position where they're under a lot of stress. So if you were going through that situation again now, with the knowledge that you have now, dealing with all that stress and fear, is there anything you could have done differently?
Uh, well, what I would do for someone else, and is what they do now for au pairs, is that there's a very good structure of support and connection. And I think for any difficult situation, connection is the most important thing.
That's big.
When I work with hospice, you don't stop people from dying. You don't make people stop feeling sad or stressed, but you connect. And when you're with another person who gets you, who can hear you and breathe with you and feel compassion for what you're feeling, it makes it easier. And I think a lot of like suicidal or despairing energy comes from feeling disconnected. In fact, a friend of mine who was a doctor in a rehab facility, worked at the Betty Ford Center for years. He's talked about how they treat addiction, and he says the opposite of addiction is connection.
I've heard of that experiment they did, Rat Park. Have you heard of that experiment that they did? It was they had all these rats in cages. They were each individual in separate cages, and they couldn't see each other. And they had their water bottle laced with heroin,
Okay.
and they had another bottle of water that was just water. So they started with just the water, and then they would take a little heroin. But over time, they got more and more addicted to the heroin until they just were only going for the heroin laced water, until they killed themselves, until they just died. Their body couldn't
Overdosed.
overdosed. So they figured that, heroin is the problem. And that's the whole war on drugs and everything. But somebody came along and said, well, wait a minute, people are not that isolated. When you take something that's that isolated and disconnected, that's might be their only option. What if we put them in a great big beautiful rat park, with all kinds of things and toys and other rats, and they could make nests and have relationships and babies. And so they did that, and they put all these rats in there, and they had these water bottles with just water and water bottles laced with heroin. And over time, the addicted ones, they would take them out of the confined cages and put them in Rat Park. So for a while, they would continue drinking the heroin water, but as they cultivated relationships, they began just going for the water until they weaned themselves off entirely. They were so engaged in social activity. It's a very, very famous. Look it up. The Rat Park.
I love that. Yeah, and it comports with everything we know about brain function, how relationships create oxytocin and different hormones in the brain that are as satisfying as addiction, more satisfying. So that's, yeah,
Isn't that
great.
something? Yeah, connection. You would think that instead of a war on drugs, we could bump up, human connection.
Right.
And yet here we are on Zoom. So
Yeah.
that's one way. So a spiritual path for someone in deep crisis, your first suggestion would be find a way to connect. I guess that's what 12 step is all about too, right?
Yeah, the healing power of community, of connection with other people is huge. And I would say the second thing would be, or equally important, is connection with self, which is what the mindfulness movement is about. The idea that we are aware of ourselves, what's going on inside us, connected with what's going on around us. And mindfulness is a bit of a tricky term because there's a translation from Pali, I think, that can be a little confusing because it's not about thinking with your mind. It's about being aware in the moment. So when I work with my clients, I call it present moment awareness.
Mm.
Let's do some present moment awareness. What's going on right now? Inside, around you, between us. All of that is it's a connection, not just social connection, but connection with self. And that combination of connecting with self and then connecting with others at some authentic level is hugely powerful. It's very
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you've probably worked with a lot of, I mean, most people would go to counseling because they're in some crisis. Do you find that there's some high degree of success getting people to be mindful? Or is it challenging?
well. I don't, especially if it's a new concept, I don't expect people to go home and do it by themselves. We
Mm.
do it together. We'll just do it in session. We'll say, let's take a minute to see what's going on right now. And I'll sort of coach them through being aware of what they're sitting on, what surface is supporting them, being aware of the breath moving in and out of their body, being aware of the sounds around them. And then in pure meditation, that's what you would do. You just stay in that state. In mindfulness-based therapy, we get into that awareness state and then notice what shows up. Because often, as soon as we get quiet and things start to catch up with us, something will arise. A feeling, a thought about mom or dad or a situation, or be an awareness of a tightness in your chest. And we'll just go with that. We'll say, okay, that's the object of our focus right now. Be with that thought or that feeling, that sensation in the body. See where it goes. See what it's trying to tell you. It's like we're listening in a particular way. And when people are in heavy crisis, it's hard to do that by yourself. We need the connection.
Mm.
So we do it in session. If they want to do it on their own, that's fine, but I don't expect they haven't failed if they don't do it. We just do it when we're together and things arise that want attention. And what's interesting is that, when we're trying not to feel things, which is what we do, when we're stressed, we try not to feel how angry or upset or sad we are. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. You can do it, but it takes a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get tired or distracted, it pops up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's like, oh no, we have to put that down.
Yeah.
So in a session, when I'm working with somebody in present moment awareness, we'll let the beach ball pop up and just look at it. And then once it pops up, you're not holding it anymore. And it's there for a minute, but then it starts to drift away. Because you're not holding it anymore.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of our process is beach balls, beach balls, beach balls.
Yeah, that's powerful. So once it comes up, if it's too much, what happens? If it's just like, no, I can't. I mean, can you let it up a little bit at a time or?
Well, here's where connection's important. Because if
Uh,
it's something that you've held down a lot, it's probably because it does feel like too much. You've been alone with it, it's been overwhelming. Maybe it's something from childhood where you didn't have the resources to deal with it. And now you're grown up and you have more resources. Plus, you have me or whoever you're working with. So if it's a very big traumatic thing, we'll do some safety containment. We'll say, okay, I want you to we'll practice being aware of where you are, sitting in a chair in a quiet room with in a safe place. And then we'll start to let yourself feel that and come back to you're in a safe place in a quiet room. And that is happening, that thought, that feeling is arising. And here you are in a safe place. You're right here. I'm right here with you. And often that connection with me, connection with place, connection with other parts of oneself is enough. to be a container for that scary thing.
Wow. I mean, that does sound scary. What if somebody's got a lot of rage or just, deep trauma? Have you had the experience of somebody just suddenly start screaming or, yeah?
I have, although often there's if there's if the person is afraid that they're going to act out, we'll do again some practice of safety. How do you come out of something that's getting to be too much?
Right.
There are some strategies like switching to, watching your breath, tapping on acupuncture points, coming out and in, or even there's some cool things from neurolinguistic programming where instead of just letting it come up however it wants, you make it into a movie with a beginning and an end.
Hmm.
And watching the movie is too much, then you make it a black and white movie, or you run it backwards, or you run it where all the voices sound like Donald Duck. You alter it in such a way that it loses its power.
Oh, now this is getting into our third question. I don't want to too much jump the gun, but these sound like methods and tools for staying sane. Let's put it that way.
Yes, we're dealing
Um,
with overwhelm. And again, I want to emphasize that these are things that it's good to do them with somebody, with a therapist, somebody who's not scared of what you're scared of,
mhm.
who can kind of hold that. There's this wonderful, I think it's a true thing, that in India, when they work with elephants, which are, huge, powerful animals, and when an elephant is upset, a human can't really do much to stop them, but what they'll do is they'll bring in a calm elephant to stand next to the upset elephant. And just the presence of that calm elephant calms the other one down.
Isn't that interesting?
So sometimes I feel like I'm the calm elephant when I'm
Yeah,
working with somebody who's really dysregulated. Is like, well, I can be regulated and I can be
yeah.
in the room with you and we'll share energy until things get better.
Does this have any repercussions on yourself? I mean, how do you take care of yourself when you're dealing with a lot of chaotic energy like that around you?
Well, uh, one thing is to be aware. Again, present moment awareness. If I'm starting to get tight in my stomach or feeling tension in my body when somebody else is having a hard time, I can remind myself, oh, wait a minute, this isn't my emergency. And I can come back to my breath and consciously relax my belly. And then I'm back to calm elephant. Um, I used to, when I was working full time, I try to leave 15 minutes between clients so I could get up and wash my hands and make a cup of herb tea and just kind of, shake it off because it wasn't mine. I would pick it up, but it wasn't mine and I could let it go. And at the end of the day, I'd do some yoga or take a walk and take a shower, or do something to uh, be clear that this wasn't mine, to let it go.
Yeah, 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 that's big. So, and then you can actually re-regulate yourself and
Mhm.
in 15 minutes and
Yeah.
get back in the saddle
It's
for the
better to
next
do
one.
it for 10 or 15 minutes throughout the day than to store it all up and need a couple of hours to decompress at the end.
Hmm. Yeah, good point. And now, especially that you have begun to change your focus to working with the terminally ill or the dying, is that a whole new challenge? Is that bringing in a lot more things to work with? Let's put it that way.
Well, I think we're kind of getting into why death.
Mm.
That's the second question, right? You were going to
Yeah,
ask.
that's it. Why have you chosen death as our topic for today? Yeah, I was kind of going to slide into it.
Well, it's not just the topic for today, but why I think I've moved toward it, partly because I'm getting older and, our sell by dates get closer as we get older. So it's my death I'm working on. But it's also, I think death is a great mindfulness tool. Samuel Johnson, the great um, British writer, said, when a man knows he's to be hanged in a fortnight, it focuses his mind wonderfully.
Boy, that's so true. My father was ill for 5 years and he would sit out on the deck. He said, I've never felt so alive, in his illness, just knowing that he had a limited time left. Everything was so alive for him.
Yeah, it sharpens our awareness that we have, as John Kabat-Zinn would say, we have only moments to live, and this is one of them. Are we fully present for this moment, or are we thinking, I'll do that later, I have other things to do? When our shelf life shortens like that, it's like, okay, I there is no later. Now's the time. And I think it helps us to get, instead of spreading out laterally on the scope of time, we get deeper in the moment and say, oh, this is it. This is it. This is this moment, this breath of air, this breeze, this look at the trees, this season. This is it.
This is it. What would
And
you,
that's a great sort of preparation. All of Zen training is about letting go, to be in this moment. And then when this moment's gone, let go of it. What you thought, what you expected, what happened, let go of it. We're here now. And death is the ultimate practice in letting go.
yeah, that's a big one. So have you come across people who are having a lot of difficulty with that? And what about people who have no concept of, mindfulness practice, or how would you approach that?
Well, I think working with anybody, particularly, but even particularly around death, you have to meet people where they are. My idea of how you should approach death and what would be a good death is that's me. And it doesn't help somebody else to put my ideas on them. So the way we start is always like asking the person, what's your understanding of what's happening right now? You get a sense. Do they know they're dying? Do the relatives know that grandma's dying? And how do they feel about it? Because every grief they're like snowflakes. Everyone's different. It's usually some mixture of grief and sadness and sometimes anger, resentment, disbelief, numbness, guilt. There's usually some kind of platter of different flavors
Mm.
going on, and it's going to change from moment to moment.
Yes.
So, I think the most helpful thing with that is to be with the person where they are and to offer, sometimes people are like, don't want to feel better. I need they can say or even not articulate it, but feel, I need to feel this. And I wouldn't take that away from them to feel what they feel.
Like an enraged elephant, right? And then you just sit there and help regulate that energy.
Yeah. Let them, if I'm not afraid of their feelings, it helps them not be afraid of their feelings. I was recently at a retreat where the theme was grief and loss. And the facilitator set it up very well. So it was a safe container for people to feel their feelings. And by the afternoon of this all-day retreat, people were sobbing, who'd had a recent or a very painful loss. And they felt like, okay, I can feel this. I can, in this safe container, I can feel all this stuff I've been holding back. And the rest of us who hadn't had a recent acute loss, we were the calm elephants. We're like, okay, go ahead and feel it. We got you.
Wow, that's deep. Are these kinds of are these readily available, these approaches, or these counselors who might be able to help people in this situation? Where would anybody find somebody like you?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
The counseling field has it's such a potentially broad scope of practice. And some people are very focused on, let's say, cognitive therapy, talking about your thoughts and correcting your thoughts and so on, which is not a bad thing, but I have experienced it as not a really deep thing. And some counselors are trained in mindfulness-based therapies. More and more, it's becoming, you can get, continuing education credits in mindfulness. I took a 2-year training postgraduate in doing this, where a group of 12 of us went through this training together, and we did therapy with each other as, we practiced on each other, and that was a life-changing experience.
That's powerful.
I would say, nowadays most people have a website who are offering therapy, and they'll say, I'm into cognitive behavioral therapy, or I do EMDR, or I do this or that modality. I would look for somebody who mentions mindfulness, but also you just need to talk to people and see if it's a good fit, because the research is that whatever modality the therapist uses, the effectiveness depends on the quality of the relationship with the therapist. So if it's somebody you click with, whatever modality, it's probably going to help.
So anybody could just look up counselors working with the issue of death. Would that be a good search term?
Well, if that's your issue,
Yeah, yeah,
or end of life issues, it's not just death, but everything that goes with
sure.
wrapping up a lifetime.
Yeah,
And there are now people who are practicing online all over the country, so you're not limited to who lives in your town.
right. Yeah, that was a big change, right? When counselors could work online. That's enormous.
Yeah, and since COVID, it's become very common for
Uh-huh.
people to do telehealth, and
Interesting.
I found it can be pretty effective.
Hmm. So with the dying, can you fill in some more details on that? I mean, where do you go? Do you work in hospice or hospitals?
Well, right now, I volunteer with a local hospice, and so I've been in facilities, I've gone to people's homes and sat with them, and what I do is always a supplement to hospice. They take care of the medical stuff, and there's a social worker, a case manager with hospice. But because of, I mean, they're limited in what they can do, both by regulation and just by logistics. How, they can't be there all the time. So they use volunteers to fill in the gaps. And most volunteers aren't counselors. That's just, I bring who I am to wherever I go. So I end up often hearing more in that way than somebody who is not trained in listening. But part of the training for a volunteer is to how to listen. I've also worked with clients, who were either terminally ill or had a loved one, caring for a loved one who was ill, sometimes knowing they were terminally ill, and just walked through all the whatever comes up, including some very practical things like what kind of paperwork do you need to have in place?
Mm,
What do you want? And once people are out of the denial stage and are like, yeah, this is really happening, then you can do some really good planning about, well, how do you want it to go? What kind of, do you want music playing? Who do you want with you? Where do you want to be when you die? What do you want done with your body? What do you want done with your stuff? Do we want to do some kind of, as I've done a little death doula work, where we talk about what is the meaning of your life? And people, that comes up, like, has it been meaningful? Have I done what I came to do? Is there any unfinished business? And that can be a job to
there you
help
go.
facilitate conversations that need to happen before you go. And then to maybe create a legacy project, to help write a memoir or make a video or go through photos and affirm what you've done while you're here. So that when you go, okay, my work here is done.
Wow, that's powerful. Just so helping them to leave their written material, like letters to the family or recordings, or just really tying it
or
all up.
photo collages, or
How nice. Yeah.
and letting people know, because we're so our society is really isolated from death. About 3 generations ago, people often, elderly people lived with their extended family. They died at home. People washed the body and laid it out, and everybody was involved in them. It wasn't weird. And now it's cut off. People are often in nursing homes. 70-80% of people die in a nursing home or a hospital rather than at home. So
Mm.
we don't see it. We don't know what we're allowed to do. I love this. When I was in hospice training, we watched a little video called "What's the first thing you should do when someone dies at home?" And
Yeah.
the answer is nothing. You
Right.
don't have to do anything. This is not an emergency. You can hang out with this person, with their body. You can talk to them. You can crawl in bed with them. What? No, I didn't know. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
This is take the time that you need to do whatever you want to do. Never don't call 911, just call hospice, or you can let the coroner know eventually, but to make this your own, it's a social event, it's a psycho-spiritual event, it's not a medical event. And just
I
having permission to do that is huge.
I I found I found one of my neighbors. He didn't show up, and I went looking, and I found him dead in his apartment. And I didn't know what to do. And I just like, oh my God. And of course I called 911, and I did not get any time with him to sit and just say, because he was a good friend. And so this is important to know, I think, when you find someone dead, you don't have to, panic.
Right.
And I did learn that in the state of Virginia, you have, I think, legally up to 5 days to have someone, dead in your house without being, you know, with formaldehyde or whatever they do, preserving the body.
Right. Without having to be embalmed. Yes.
Without being embalmed, you can have up to 5 days. And I guess you don't even have to report it, except that they do have to, at some point, determine that it was not a murder and natural death. Have you learned any? I don't know much about it, so this was a big shock to me. As It's a real learning curve. So,
Mhm.
have you had to work with the families of people who just found their loved one passed away or dead on the floor? Or...
I've not had that happen with a client directly, no. But I have secondhand stories about that, and how
Mm-hmm.
really confronting it is to discover, especially if it's a suicide or some kind of, messy death, as opposed to a, kind of natural or expected death. There's that shock factor and guilt and distress. But it's, how we think about it. What happened is this person left their body, whether by their own hand, by accident, by foul play, they left. And all the other stuff is the meaning that we give to it.
Would you have any words of wisdom for people who are dealing with the idea of suicide?
Well, it would depend on the context. My first question would be, if you're thinking about killing yourself, why? What is it that makes you think that is your best option? If it's someone who's, let's say, in intractable pain, I would say, okay, that level of suffering makes sense. You'd want to end that. I would say, let's explore whether, we can get some pain management on board. If it's existential despair, I would say connection. Let's get you connected, because usually when you're suicidal, the thinking is everybody be better off without me, or nobody will notice if I'm gone.
Right.
And if even one person will notice that you're gone, it changes the way you think about it.
Wow. So if someone says, I don't have any family, I don't have any friends, where can they connect, do you think?
Mhm. Well, so in my town, there's a hotline, where you can call 24/7 and talk to somebody. And if you're suicidal, they'll get you connected, they'll send the police out to do a wellness check. They'll get you in somewhere, talk to somebody. And I think I know there's a national suicide hotline. Most places have some sort of, and it's faulty. There's a lot of um, gaps in coverage, but it's a beginning. It can be a lifeline until you get something better going on. And one of the most useful things for people who are able to function at all is to help somebody else. Because that's a deep connection. If you've got any strengths or skills or resources at all going on for you, you can be helpful to somebody else.
I would imagine that would be hard for somebody who's really on the brink, who doesn't even have enough energy for themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see how that could turn it around. But they need a little something to get started with that, right?
Right. Well, that's why you just, when you got no spoons left, you call somebody who can help you.
And what
And
happens when you call? Because they just talk to you. I mean, they talk you off the edge, but then what? You're still back where you were.
well, again, when the system is working well, they get you, they'll if you're actively suicidal, they'll see that you get somewhere safe. You can be if you're actively suicidal, you can be admitted to a mental hospital, whether you can pay for it or not, you'll get in somewhere. And the trouble is that a mental hospital, they can stop you from killing yourself temporarily. They can't make you want to live.
Hmm.
But if the system is working well, they'll get you connected with ongoing counseling or with a recovery group or something that helps you establish some connections,
Hmm.
some services, some resources.
Hmm.
And, when it's not working well, bad things happen. I was an emergency clinician for about a year where I would go to the emergency room when somebody came in who had self-harmed or was threatening self-harm. Spend an hour talking to them to find out what their situation was, and then spend the next 3 or 4 hours trying to find them a bed somewhere because the system is kind of fractured.
Hmm.
But it was a beginning, something.
Hmm.
And again, even one person,
Yeah.
whether it's the clinician in the emergency room or a compassionate nurse at the hospital, or sometimes it's amazingly, it's like the person who cleans the room
Yeah.
who connects with you. And then you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there's something here that I could live for.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I heard a story of this one young man on the Golden Gate Bridge, which was notorious for having people jump. And he described his story. He was standing there ready to, thinking he's going to jump. And he said, if one person would just come by and say, are you okay? Then he said he would not have jumped. But he did jump and he broke his back, and it just ended up being a very dramatic rescue and all this. And so after he recovered, well, he was a quadriplegic from his broken back, but he decided to make it a mission to help people not go to that point of suicide, and tell them that, there is life after, you know, thinking about suicide or even an attempt. So I'll never forget that. It brought me to tears, but that he found his mission the
Mhm.
hard way, I'd say.
Yeah. And often people who had a very, who should have died and didn't for some reason, it again, it sharpens your focus. Like, what am I here for? Why did I survive? And often it's something like, oh, I'm here to help other people who are where I was, have a better outcome. I remember, I hadn't thought about this in years, but when I was much younger and was going through a very painful divorce and was feeling very isolated and despairing, I was wandering around in the middle of the night, downtown,
Mm.
sat on a bus bench and a kid, like a teenager, came by walking his bike, and he stopped and he said, "Hey, you okay?"
Oh,
And we ended up talking, and he walked me like 2 miles back to my house, and it might be a little dramatic to say it saved my life, but it was something. It was just that moment. And this kid had a story of his own. He told me his story about his life, and I told him mine a little bit, and I've never seen him again. It was just one of those things in the middle of the night that I think meant something to both of us.
an angel came by.
Yeah, little angel, this, rough talking teenage angel.
Wow. Yeah, my sister committed suicide some years ago, and I try to be very mindful of seeing someone, who looks depressed, to make sure I say, "Are you okay?" Or just say something, and that's big. I would like in the comment box underneath our podcast here to list some sources. So that might bring us to our last question. What tools and methods would you feel would be most helpful for people struggling to stay sane and balanced? We've talked a little about mindfulness, but what else do you have?
Well, again, it depends on how how resourced you are. There are a lot of options for people who are fairly functional, who could take a course or learn something and put it into practice in their own life. If you're really, really struggling, you just need to connect with, and whether that's a free resource like, AA recovery programs like that. There's support groups. I know in my town, there's a NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, has support groups for people with different mental illnesses and their families. There's a support group. One of the local hospices does a grief support group for people who you don't have to have had their hospice service. It's open to everybody. For people who have lost somebody. The churches have groups. I would say, if you don't have money and you don't have a lot of independent resources, look for, sorry, uh, look for what's available. The newspaper has a list of support groups and free things you can do. I would say
Mhm.
start by getting connected, and that can lead you to, people will tell you, oh, this counselor is really good, or, the food pantry is really good, or here's a place you can volunteer if you've got any, you can, once you start connecting with people, they connect with you with other things, other resources. If you're functioning, if you're just kind of the normal stressed out American that most of us are, I would say meditation or mindfulness, and that takes many forms. It can be sitting, in Zen tranquility, or it could be mindfulness in action, how to parent your children mindfully, mindfulness at work. There's all kinds of courses, but some aspect of paying attention to the present moment is hugely powerful.
And service, right?
Service, be
Do
volunteering.
something for someone else if you have any energy at all to do that.
And then in terms of specific tools, there's something I discovered 25 years ago called EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques, which is a way of tapping on acupuncture points on your own body.
Mm.
It's a routine that takes a minute or two and can often change how you feel. I do it with clients all the time, and it would be, within 5 minutes, they were having different thoughts and feelings about some memory or some incident, and were able to deal with it in a much better way. It's all over the internet. There are lots of places you can learn EFT, or emotional freedom technique.
What is that based on?
It's based on the Chinese medicine idea of qi. flowing through the body in these certain pathways. They call them, in English, we call them meridians. And when you tap on the end point of a meridian, this is the end point of the bladder meridian, which runs over your head and down your back and all the way down to your pinky toe. If there's any blockage in energy, this is supposed to get it moving again. And the basic premise is that any form of distress, whether it's physical illness or mental distress or emotional upset, is due to a blockage in the chi not the energy, life energy not flowing well. And if you can get the energy flowing, you feel better physically, you feel better mentally, you feel better emotionally, and quickly. It's quite miraculous, actually. I'm always surprised at how well it works.
So you're just tapping on the meridian points. That's it.
Yep.
And, yeah.
Yep. You tap here and under a couple places on your chest, and you're saying a certain. There's a routine to it. You need to watch a video and learn how to do it. But like I said, you can learn it in an hour, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes to do. And I remember when my daughter was in high school, and she's in her 40s now, so this was a while back. Or in college, she would call when she was in college, she'd call home upset about something that had happened. And after she'd vented for a while, I'd say, well, honey, you want to tap on it? She'd go, oh, Mom, I don't want to tap. That doesn't work. I'd say, okay, you want to tap on it? All right. And we'd go on to tapping. She'd go, darn it, I feel better.
I was wrong. Oh,
Well, you don't have to believe in it for it to work.
yeah,
Just
that's
believe in it enough to
great.
do it and then see if it works. And that's one of the things I love about Buddhism. And I've done a lot of work in various religions about, what are the teachings? What are the teachings that tend to go through all of the religions? But I'm not very interested in dogma, about rules and beliefs that are you can't prove or disprove. It's like, is that helpful? Sun Bear's wonderful Native American teacher from a while back used to say, I'm not interested in your philosophy if it doesn't grow corn.
Oh,
So I'm interested in philosophy that grows corn, that does something useful. And what I love about the teachings of the Buddha, not the trappings of Buddhism, which is a lot of numbered lists and realms and stuff that are, I don't know. But what the Buddha said was, don't take my word for it. Everything I'm telling you, don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. And he gave techniques, do this, focus here, do this experiment and see for yourself if it's helpful.
yeah. The Eightfold Path, right?
Yeah, there's a numbered list.
Another one, yeah.
And when I work with clients, I always try to have them have an experience that tells them, is this helpful or not? Because if it's helpful, you'll keep doing it. And if you're just taking my word for it that it might be helpful, then you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I did study Buddhism, and that was a big part. The whole thing was, don't take our word for it, no blind faith here. Just do it and you'll see.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah.
Walk this way and see what happens, see where you end up.
Yeah, I've kind of been leaning toward Buddhism my whole life more than Christianity. Christianity is more of a heart, I think, devotional, no science to it, just get the heart into that love space. And I think there's a place for that too. And in fact, Buddhism, they say that the metta practice, which is the Buddhist practice for cultivating the heart, is the third wheel of the stool of Buddhism, because you have your concentration, then the mindfulness practices, and metta. Those are the 3 legs of Buddhism that help the whole thing stand up. Cultivating the heart, is a big one. Music too, I think, helps for me.
The path I have followed most is that of the Western Sufis who dance
Right.
and sing, because it's experiential. You're in a circle of people who are singing a phrase from a religion, if it's Kyrie eleison or Om Mani Padme Hum, but you're moving in harmony, you're singing together, you're vibrating together, and suddenly you're just like part of one thing. that idea that everything's connected, you can feel it. It's like you're part of this moving mandala
Yeah.
of connectedness, and your heart just leaps with joy.
Boy, oh boy, I would absolutely recommend Sufi dancing for connection.
Yes, yes. You can get all the hugs you want at a Sufi dance
All the
if you
hugs you want.
can.
Just, yeah, the energy is wonderful. So that would be my
And
recommendation.
music itself, because energy is vibration, and music is a very audible, it's a vibration you can sense very directly. The
Mhm.
subtler vibrations of chi flowing, he's like, I don't know. But music, you can feel it.
You
You
can
can
definitely
feel
feel it.
your eardrums, but you can feel it in your body. You can feel your heart vibrating. And one thought is that medicine in the future will all be energy medicine, vibrational medicine.
Yeah, I do believe that. Yeah.
That what
But
we're doing now in terms of surgery and chemotherapy and all of those things will seem barbaric,
yes.
if we can really master energy by energy medicine.
Yeah, and I think it's right around the corner if we can manage our governments and politics and money and yeah, it's there. I think the technology is there. We just haven't been able to implement a lot of that. Um, so, and music also can be detrimental if it's used the wrong way. I think some music out there is absolutely abusive to the body. Don't I mean you can feel is the some of the
Heavy metal.
heavy metal. So my feeling is if someone is in that mood of like say suicidal and they're listening to that kind of music because it kind of really stirs it up and augments it. Um, what would you think? Just turn that off and listen to something more beautiful or what?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
or just
And in this age of the internet, what's amazing is you can have anything with a couple of clicks.
yeah.
If you have internet service, you can find beautiful music, uplifting music, healing music, and that's a very quick energy changer. Listening
Yeah,
to music.
that's always worked for me.
And
That's
that's something you can do even if you don't have very much energy. You can, make a click and let the music change the energy rather
yeah,
than having to do something.
just piano. I love piano. Any other suggestions, comments, what we could talk about for the last couple of minutes?
I don't know. Do you have any questions?
I think we covered everything, didn't we? We went on why you chose your death topic for today. What tools and methods can people use to feel more balanced, and how you described your spiritual path. Did we cover it all? These are such juicy questions,
I
and
know. Well, we never
lots.
cover it all, but
Wow,
I
yeah,
think we've hit on some important points, and I hope this would be helpful or encouraging to people who are struggling to find help, whatever that looks like, whether it's paid professional help or connecting with a self-help group or just, listening to good music, to find things that uplift your spirit. And there's a Tara Brach, wonderful meditation teacher, wrote a book called
TR. How is it?
T
Tara.
A Tara, Tara, and then Brach like Bach, Brach.
Right.
She wrote a book called Trusting the Gold, which is about trusting the basic goodness of ourselves and of humans.
Hmm.
And that can be difficult because we bury our gold. She tells that story about that giant Buddha somewhere in Thailand, I think, that was this big, cement Buddha, and finding out when after an earthquake, the cement cracked and they discovered that there was a solid gold Buddha underneath,
Mm.
and that monks from 100 years ago had covered it up with plaster so that it wouldn't be stolen by marauders, and all those monks had been killed or died off, and nobody knew that there was a gold Buddha underneath that plaster.
Wow. There you go. That reminds me of the story of the beggar sitting on the box for,
Yes.
30 years begging, and somebody says, "What you got in that box?" He says, "I don't know." And they open it and it's full of gold
Gold
coins.
coins. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That there's goodness, there's gold, um, and that no matter how much it's covered up with our, ignorance and anger and upset and chaos, there's goodness, there's gold, and it's in us. It's our own gold, and gold everywhere, and gold recognizes gold. Gain recognizes gain. So when you start to find the gold in yourself or see the gold in somebody else, it can spread. And awareness can spread.
Mm, this is powerful. So connection, music, and keep looking for that gold.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that
Mindfulness,
gold.
mindful present moment awareness,
Yeah,
tap on stuff.
beautiful. Well, Paula, I want to thank you so much. This has been a great pleasure, and I hope we have you on again soon.
Thank you, Dora. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, you take care now. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.